Tell me what you want, what you want, what Good evening, my predicted trades family. Hope everybody's doing well. It's Sunday, July 30th. Hope you all had a great weekend. Time to dig into some charts. Just waiting for my toss to unfreeze itself. There we go. So, if we just take a look at last week, and lately we've been very strong and bullish to the upside. We have some slight dips back, hold a zone, and then keep pushing. Monday, Tuesday, nice up days. Wednesday started to break that trend that we were following, but we still held the bottom of our stack squeezes. We got that. We had FOMC on Wednesday, which basically explored both ends of those squeezes, top and bottom. And then we got that gap up into Thursday. We immediately ran into some sellers, dipped down to the same zone that we ran up to on Tuesday and Wednesday. We tried to hold that zone, but ultimately rejected the 4-hour squeeze top, lost that zone, and had the big sell-off down to the week's lows and the previous week's lows. But overall held that zone around 45.60, held it again overnight. We had the daily 8, daily 15 also there, making a big pocket of liquidity. And you can see that we held and reversed and engulfed on Friday all of that selling. And in fact, we pretty much closed right at that zone, and now we're gapping back over it. So we'll have to see if the market's going to remain strong. I mean, you have to say after a big sell-off like this, from a 4-hour squeeze top to a 4-hour squeeze bottom, to see us hold and reverse right back up to the week's highs, obviously negating this gap up, just shows that the market is still very strong. We have the daily 21 sitting down at our next zone of support, down at 45.30 up to about 45.50. So if we were to get in a scenario where we're kind of setting up a head and shoulders, where the shoulder line is basically around that 4600, the head up at this 4634, do we reject below this zone at 4610 and head back down to the squeeze bottom and to the daily 21, which we have not tested in a number of weeks? Or do we continue to hold above the daily 8, push through last week's high, and fire this 4-hour squeeze to the upside? Our third Keltner sits up near 46.57. Which is also right near the bottom of a zone created by the highs on the weekly time frame. The bottom of that zone near 46.60. And if you see, we have not tested this since come on, there we go. March 28th of 22. So this would have been, like when the Russian invasion started. It's the last time that we were up at these key levels. So let's see if we're going to continue to explore this 4-hour squeeze and chop around this zone from 45.60 up to 46.20, 46.10, really. We've got up to the top, sold back to the bottom, we're up near the top. We could be setting into a range, and we do have a number of key earnings coming up this week. And let's take a look at our economic calendar to start. Let's refresh that. There we go. So we have some PMI data, jobs data, ADP employment, jobless claims, more PMI, some factory numbers, and then the big one next week will be NFP non-farm payroll. Some more jobs data. And then coming up the week after that will be CPI and PPI to make for a volatile Thursday and Friday. So we've got some interesting economic data coming our way soon. Let me pull up the earnings calendar real quick. Here it is. Let's see. Here, I found it. All right. So, coming up this week. Monday seems a little light as far as big names. On Tuesday, we've got some cruise lines, we've got some Uber, some Pfizer, some Caterpillar, some transportation, a mixed bag. But the big one Tuesday after close is AMD. At Pinterest, got some Starbucks. MicroStrategy, there's some interesting ones definitely on Tuesday. Going into Wednesday, we've got a little more health, XLV. PayPal, Shopify, Qualcomm, Robinhood, Etsy, all big ones for Wednesday. But the biggest definitely on Thursday is going to be Amazon and Apple after the close. You also want to keep an eye on Coinbase, Square, which is Block now. But some Bitcoin, or Bitcoin, altcoin, whatever you want to call it. Those names might be seeing some movement come Thursday. Along with big tech, there's Airbnb, DraftKings, if you're into that kind of stuff. Ooh, Moderna on Thursday before the bell. And looks like we rounded out with, some meme stocks, your Fubos, your Nikolas, and some energy, Frontier Communications, yada yada. So, big ones coming this week. Definitely some chips, AMD, Qualcomm. We got Shopify, Amazon, Apple, PayPal. So definitely some interesting names, and Apple and Amazon, big names that can move the market. So we'll have to see if we stay in this range and play that range until it breaks. We are looking strong just to start the future session, but we could easily open up right back down in that range. Again, between 45.60 at the bottom of the 4-hour squeeze, 46.10 and 46.20 at the top of the 4-hour squeeze. So let's keep an eye on that range. Let's see if we can get above it and hold it to take off, especially watch last week's high, 46.34.5. And if we start to break that 45.60 and last week's low, then chances are we're going to drop on down to 45.36 for the daily 21 sits, and the bottom of this zone around 45.30. Making like a 6-point zone around the mean. Moving on, let's take a look at NQ. NQ fought all the way back up to last week's high. Looks like even printing a little higher high. Darn it, where's that candle? There we go. Little higher high tonight's overnight session. Pulling back from it, but overall grinding against the top of that 4-hour squeeze. If we roll over and start to lose 15,800, kind of the last bounce point. 15,775, last bounce point from Friday, then it could start to look a little bit like a double top. And we might want to explore the bottom of this M pattern, which could be setting up. If we were to lose that 15,775, it could cause a quick drop back to this zone that we did try to hold and take off from on Tuesday. It provided resistance on Wednesday. The zone around 15,620 up to 15,660. That could maybe be the last little spot to hold before a full reversion to the mean. The daily 21 sitting down near 15,542. And the bottom of that 4-hour squeeze down near the next zone of support near 15,500, big psych level. You could also say it's a little bit of an expanding megaphone with, a little bit more of a flat bottom. So let's see if NQ can remain strong. Let's see if they're going to pump into some tech names like Amazon and Apple going into earnings. It could very well be that we see a little bit of rally out of those names into earnings, and then we've been seeing some negative reactions even on decent earnings lately. So could be that they're building against where they know sellers are going to be sitting, and then they'll just use that as a reason to dump it back. You never know. Moving on to Ready. So right away what stuck out is we have kind of a double bottom of support from a couple of Tuesdays ago and last Thursday, right at about that 1958 up to 1960. And now that's where the bottom of the 4-hour squeeze sits. So let's see if Ready can stay above 1980 where the daily 8 sits. Try to get through this 2012 last week's high in an attempt to try to push higher up to 2040. But if we cannot get to the top of that 4-hour squeeze, that 2010, and if we roll over and lose 1980, it could cause a cascade back down to the bottom of that 4-hour squeeze, 1960, and down to the daily 21 around 1950. YM. Was definitely strong. Come on. Definitely a leader last week on YM, Monday, Tuesday, and for days. I think I saw something like YM had gone up for 12 days straight, or maybe it was 16 days straight and setting a new record. But they were definitely rotating into YM a lot. Well, NQ kind of struggled, sold off, came back up. Just your classic rotation. Taking profit on tech, moving it over into YM, pumping it up. And now you can see we're above this key level, 35,413. We've done a good job holding that as the low for the last, at least last week. And now that's where the bottom of the 4-hour squeeze sits, as well as the daily 8, right around that 35,413. So as long as we can hold that, 35,400, 35,500, kind of our last bounce point from Friday, we could continue this journey back up to the top of the 4-hour squeeze, 35,800, with the goal of trying to break through to 36,000. If we start to roll over and lose that 35,400, we'll fire that 4-hour squeeze to the downside, likely to get back to 35,170 where the daily 15 sits, and the daily 21 at 35,040. Just call it 35,000. That's basically where it was on Friday, big key psych level. Watch that 4-hour squeeze, can set the tone and the range. where we can learn a lot on, are they going to try to push through the top? Do they reject it hard along with last week's highs and roll over to test last week's lows? Moving on, Apple reporting this week. And, pretty much been stuck in a range for the last couple of weeks between that 192 up to 196. You can see we have very stacked squeezes. Or we did last week, at least. And that 4-hour squeeze, the big thick one, we basically ran into it, the previous Thursday sold off to the bottom, ran into it again on Friday, sold off to the bottom. Monday ran into the top, sold off near the bottom, and the daily 8. Kind of see the pattern that when we're in these stack squeezes, we tend to hit each side and reverse. So we are slowly grinding into a big fat daily squeeze top. That's where we opened on Thursday and caused the sell-off. And then we fought right back up on Friday. Overall, let's see if we can stay in this 195, 196 range in an attempt to get up to this 198.23 high that happened a couple of Wednesdays ago. Or if we're going to keep resisting that 196, 196 and a half, start to roll over and lose 195, then we would likely be going down to test the daily 8 at 193.75, the daily 15 at 192.4-ish, call it, where the bottom of the 4-hour squeeze sits, and the daily 21 near 191.5. Moving on, AMD reporting this week. And basically been trapped in this zone between 108.5, 109, and spanning up to about 113.5, 114. Did a good job holding the bottom of a 4-hour squeeze and near the bottom of a daily squeeze last week. Fought back up to the daily moving averages as set above at the top of the 4-hour squeeze. Key level 114.5, been providing the resistance. But let's see if we can hold above 112 where the daily 8 sits. Try to push up to that 114.5, 115.5 where the daily 50 sits at the top of the 4-hour squeeze. And if it can push through that, then it would be a play up to the daily squeeze top at about 118.5 up to 121.5-ish. If we roll over and start to lose that 112, then it'll be a back test of 110, 109 at the bottom of the 4-hour squeeze. Should we start to give that out, then it would be dipping down to the daily and 2-day squeeze bottom, and the second count near the downside, which is near 104.5. Moving on to Amazon. Got below its daily moving averages and rejected a bunch last week, but got right down near the bottom of the daily squeeze and the daily 50 and reversed right back up from 126 up to that 132, which has been providing resistance. Overall, let's see if we can hold above 130 where the daily 8 sits. Yep, pretty much 130 is also where the daily 21 sits. Should we start to lose that, it'll be a dip back down to 128. The low from last Thursday, should that lose, then down to the daily 50 near 126, near last week's lows at the bottom of the daily squeeze. If we can hold above 130 on any dips in these daily moving averages, then looking for a play back up through 132, 133, and then a push up to 135, 136 at the top of the daily squeeze. Excuse me, one second. All right, sorry about that. Just had to get a drink of water. Google had that big old spike last week, and has just been slowly grinding higher up above 130, pushing to 133.74 at the high last week. Let's see if it can continue to stay above 130 and continue to push up to 135, 134.75, 135. Beyond that, we're past third Keltner, so it could be getting a little extended after the earnings report and might take a little dip back. If it loses 130, then it's down to 127, 126.5 where the daily 8 sits. Oop. If we start to lose the daily 8 around 126.5, then it would be down to the daily 21 near 123.5, 124. And if we lose that, it would be to the daily 50 at 122.5, basically where it took off from at earnings, or after the earnings. But definitely watch these lows from the post-earnings wicks down near 128.5. Could also be the support that keeps us above all those daily moving averages and continues to push us higher on Google. Moving on to Meta. Meta up to 325 after their earnings. Big old push. Tagged 330, came on back to 310. So definitely look for that 310 to be support as the low after the earnings gap up. It's also where that first Keltner sits. But we close up near 325. So also just look for 320 and 321.5. Kind of the bounce point from late in the day Friday and that second Keltner. If that can continue to be support, then it could be a push back up to that 330, 332.5. Past that, we're past third Keltner, but you'd be playing up to 340. If we start to lose that 320, then it could be a rollover to retest 315 and 310. Those lows from the post-earnings wicks. Moving on, Microsoft. Not the best reaction to earnings, but just made it down to the daily 50, almost to the daily squeeze bottom, and had a little reversal back up on Friday. So let's see if we can continue to stay above the daily 50 at 335-ish. As long as we can stay above that 335-ish, the sellers that were there on Thursday and pre-market Friday will be trapped sellers. We could break through this trend line from these highs. If we get through 340, basically Friday's highs, you'll have trapped sellers down here. It could be a short squeeze that carries us back up above our daily moving averages and back up to this 350 zone that we rejected going into earnings. Moving on, Netflix. Down on earnings and still remaining weak. There's usually a general rule that when Netflix goes down on earnings, it should be left alone for a couple of weeks. I have hit a couple of good Netflix trades in the last couple of weeks. Whenever we got near an inflection point like 420, playing it back up to the 428, getting down there 419, 415, playing it back up to 426. There's been a couple of good trades even on Friday. Overall, let's see if we continue to hold above the daily 50 at about 418. We've got that key level at 420. So see if that 2-point range can continue to hold us. If not, we're going to retest these lows near 412. Should that give out in 410, then it would likely be down to 404, the second Keltner down, and then down to 400, where the bottom of a daily squeeze sits. NVIDIA. Just a big old boom up to this 477.65. We did push about $1.50 past that from recent highs. Made it back down to our daily moving averages, held the daily 15, daily 8, and took back off to that 470, almost 475-ish last Thursday. But overall, a nice uptrend and back above its daily moving averages. So draw your trend lines from lows. And now you can do something like this. Some people grab all of those extreme wicks. I like to just grab something that is simple and catches a lot of low wicks. Like this, here, boom, even here. So as long as we're holding above this trend line, we are still in an uptrend. And it looks like we went into a 1 hour squeeze near the end of the day on Friday. A little bit of a bull flag setting up. So overall, let's see if we can stay above Friday's lows near 464. 464-ish. As long as we can continue to hold above that and the 1 hour squeeze bottom, we can take back off to the top of that squeeze at 470 to last week's highs near 474 in an attempt to get back to this 477.65. If we can clear that, then it'd be a play up to 490, 500, but after 490 we are past third Keltner on a name that's pretty extended, had a big old run into earnings and push for more. Oh, sorry. We are running into earnings. NVIDIA will report 8/23. Okay, so that's next month. NVIDIA is usually always the last to report. So let's see if we can keep trucking. Let's see if this 477.865 continues to be a resistance point that creates kind of a double top and a reset before earnings. We'll have to see. If we start to lose 460, then we're likely coming down to 457, 452, where the daily 8, daily 15 sit below 452. Then it's down to 444, where the daily 21 sits. Just call it 445. QQQ. So QQQ pulled back to daily moving averages, was pretty much held the daily 15. There's this silly wick that happened, but in a 4 hour squeeze and slowly grinding against the top. We ran into that top on Thursday. We were in those tight stack squeezes going into that FOMC. Pushed up to the top on Thursday, almost made it to the bottom, but didn't even need to make it all the way there before coming right back up to the top. So NQ remaining very strong. QQQ remaining strong. Let's see if we can continue this party up through 385, 388, kind of the recent high, with a goal to get to 390, 391.5 where that third Keltner sits, which would be firing that 4 hour squeeze to the upside. But if we just can't get through 385, roll over and start to lose 381.5, then it could be a trip back down to these daily moving averages. The daily 8 at 378.8, daily 15, 377.5. And if we lose that, then we will get down to the daily 21 near 374.5 at the bottom of the 4 hour squeeze. Again, kind of another expanding megaphone where we could run into that top or roll back to the bottom and play this zone going into a big earnings week. And should we start to lose something like 371.5 at the bottom of the 4 hour squeeze, then it could cause an even bigger drop down to the daily 50 near 362. Let's go to SPY. Bit of the same thing. We've been doing a great job holding 352 and made a push all the way up to almost, 452. We've been holding very well. We made a push up to 459.5, almost at 460, before rolling back to hold that 452 again, and now that's where the bottom of the 4 hour squeeze sits at that 452. Overall, I want to see us hold above 455, kind of the lows from mid and late day on SPY. As long as we can hold above 455, then we can try to continue this party up through 458, 459.5, up to 460, 460.5, where the third Keltner sits. But if we can't get through that 4 hour squeeze top, can't get through 458 or 459 and start to roll over and lose 455, Then it could be back down to last week's lows, that 452. Below that, 451, the daily 15. And below that, the daily 21 sits down at 448.5, right near the recent lows from a couple of Mondays ago. Moving on to Tesla. Tesla has based multiple times at this 256, 258. Went down on earnings, but held that key zone and has given some pops back to the daily moving averages. Came back to that zone again and right back up to those daily moving averages. So you have your zone set. They are trying to build a base. We have a bit of a double bottom and a double U. We have to take out 270, 273 and a half-ish to start to take out the middle of that W and try to complete the journey back up to 280, 290, 295 at the top of the daily squeeze. But if we cannot get through 270, 273, we'll call it, and we start to roll over and lose 264, then it will be back down to test this base again. Moving on to VIX. VIX's been pretty quiet lately and basically stuck between about 13.2 up to 14. Obviously, we had that big sell yesterday, which sent VIX up to the top of its daily squeeze near 15, and the daily 50 near 14.8, but reversed right back down near that 13.2. Overall, if we can get below 13.2, get down to 13, and the bottom of this daily squeeze, we could see a strong push on the market. To going into the beginning of the week and going into those big tech earnings. But if we're going to see a little selling to go back and test last week's lows, then we'll likely see VIX try to hold that 13.2, reverse back up through 13.5, up to these daily moving averages, 1375, 1390, where the daily 21 sits. That 14 where we kept topping out. And if we get through 14, then it would be a play right back up to 15, right back up to that daily 50 at 14.75. That's if we're going to see some selling and retest of the lows of last week. So that's it for prep. Hopefully this was helpful for everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I can stick around for a minute and just see if anyone has any questions. You can type it in the Discord chat. You can type it in the YouTube chat. Oh, thank you, Mike, for the kind words. If you guys found this helpful, maybe throw a thumbs up, a little like on the video on YouTube. Always helps us out. And just to recap on ES. Just like I said, 455, I'd like to hold on SPY. On ES, it's kind of that 45.60 at the lows. 45.90 for any quick dips early in the week to try to keep pushing. And if we start to lose the 45.90, it's down to 45.60. We start to lose that, it's down to 45.35, 36, where the daily 21 sits. We're right in the middle of that zone. So let's see if market can remain strong or if we see some interesting rotation going into big tech earnings this week. Say we're pretty light on economic data. We just had our FOMC. We just had our GDP and PCE all last week, and we can see that they are still trying to push this market up. So let's see if it can continue. that's it for prep. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you guys tomorrow in the chat to wrap up the end of our free July. If you're kind of new, we have been running a free July where everyone could test out the tool that we distribute every day on their options charts. That is coming to an end, but always reach out if you're interested in trying it out a little longer. If you aren't able to join us for the free July, we can always figure something out. Mike, that's a good question. I believe the daily 8, daily 21 are exponential. The daily 15, daily 50 are simple moving averages. And there's, little reasons behind all of that, but, basically the daily 8's going to try to hug as close as possible, so we throw exponential on that. The daily 21, I always like to throw exponential so it's a little more elastic and can get closer to price action. On a reversion to the mean, you're probably going to get to the exponential first before you get to the simple. The simple's a little smoother. And that's why I use the simple for the 15. It's usually not, the absolute strongest. The 8 is what we got back to a bunch recently. And we barely even tap the 15. Like the 15, it's not that heavily weighted. The 8 is more weighted, and the 21 is more weighted. The daily 50, which sits way, way, way down below. I don't even check because I think it's like right at third Keltner, the downside. But that daily 50, which is simple, is down at 4,400. So overall, that's the thinking behind the daily moving averages. I'll wait for just a little longer. I think I see somebody typing a question. Our brother Neutrino. Oh, I see. Thank you, Neutrino, if you're listening. Not sure if you're tuned in, but always keeping an eye on the room and keeping us safe from these scammers. We get them all the time. Go ahead and ban that guy right now. And he's gone. But thanks for tuning in, folks. Going to wrap this up. It's 8 o'clock. Go enjoy the rest of your evening. We'll see you all here bright and early tomorrow morning. We won't have a prep tomorrow morning because we had this evening prep. But we'll get some morning preps in as the week progresses. Thanks again for tuning in, and have a good night.